Hello, what is happening, everyone? Welcome into another live stream with us over on the ZBrush team. My name is Ian Robinson. I'm a ZBrush trainer here, and I'm joined by Louie Tucci, who's also a ZBrush trainer. But more importantly, we're here with Mr. Mike Thompson. He is for sure. Hey, how you doing, buddy?
What's up, man? Thanks for having me.
Of
Mike
course.
T in the house.
Yes, sir.
Mike T, LT, and MT come together. Finally, here we are.
We in here.
Absolutely. So we have a lot to cover today now. So just to kind of fill everyone in, we've been doing a bunch of Redshift renders lately to kind of help people get into what Redshift is about. But more importantly, too, we also want to cover techniques in ZBrush that talk about how you absolutely can use your ZBrush techniques, painting, and sculptural methods, you know, as you're prepping for your final render. And yes, absolutely, this is really, really, really live. So voice cracks and all is happening today for sure. So
anything can happen, and it usually will. This is unscripted.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we do that, we're gonna have Mike Thompson here, a Clio award-winning artist. He does ZBrush, he does 2D paintovers, he does a lot of stuff. He does Stylistically. Mike, you're such a busy dude. Can you please take the words out of my mouth and go ahead and tell the world, this camera, that camera, whatever camera you're in, what you're about, who you are. Tell them in, brother.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you for that wonderful intro. Yeah, so I've been streaming for you guys for a minute. I think at least 2 years now. But over, I guess about 2 years ago, got together with my good friend Bradley, and we decided, you know, look, we're doing all this client work for people. We never miss a deadline for them, but when it comes to our own personal work, we don't really, you know, we look at like 70% of the way through, 80%, and then we'll lose interest or change topics or whatever, get busy, you know, life happens. So we decided to start the Stylist League, And basically, it's a community of digital artists. You know, we get together, we talk about shared interests and stories, experiences, artistic processes, and we have a show that we put on every week. It's either Friday or Saturday, and we will bring on guests. We've had some heavy hitters on our show, and this month we have Raphael Phillips, who you and Louie did an interview with Raphael for the
Summit.
The thing, the thing.
Yeah.
ZBrush
Summit.
Summit.
The big
Summit. There it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. My sister dropped me on my head when I was little, so I forget words sometimes.
You and me both.
Yeah. So it's dope. It's we have a Discord. We sculpt stuff. We have a different topic every month, and we're on Spawn this month. So we just started.
Hey, let me ask you a question right out of the gate about that.
Sure.
People are tuning in and want to know more. How does a person get invited onto that?
Oh, well, listen, man, if you are interested, I think you don't have to say another word.
I was just asking for a friend,
Oh, well, then, then we'll vet them. I'll send it to Bradley. We'll vet the person.
His people being there.
Exactly. Yeah,
Exactly.
I got it open. That was like, you just opened the Pandora's box. You said, what?
Nice.
Yeah. Well, I definitely shared the links. I shared your Instagram for Stylist League as well as the YouTube. People can check that out. So if you have any other links too, Mike, feel free to chuck at me and I'll make sure that the chat gets it. But without further ado, so let's get into the meat and potatoes of the stream today too, which is talking about your sculpting techniques and your painting techniques in ZBrush as you prep for a Redshift render. More specifically, we will be covering some subsurface scatter techniques just to kind of, or just more of like information about how you can actually approach subsurface scatter and kind of demystify some of those sliders that are in there. And so without further ado, Mike, let's go ahead and have you take the.
Hey, before you guys get started, you said something about some meat and potatoes. Is there going to be a vegetarian option in this program?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We'll get some portobello mushrooms in there too. Don't worry. I got you.
Let's see. Let me just swap my screen over here. So you guys saw when we were waiting to go on, you saw the cap renders. That was all done in Redshift. So I've been playing around with Redshift for a little while, and it took a little getting used to, like anything else that's new, but I got some pretty good results. So I'm going to switch over to my Photoshop screen here and pull up the ones that we had on earlier.
No worries. Look at that transition, man. That transition is amazing.
I feel like I'm watching a sports broadcast here. Here we go, live.
Yeah,
that's right, man. That is right. Wow. Yeah,
these are beautiful renders, man. This zombie cap is gnarly in the best way possible. I love it.
Bro. Thank you. Well, listen. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but
I saw that right out of the gate. Let's not get on here. Here we go.
A little what if action. So, let me just make this the full screen here. So this is kind of like the hero render that you guys are using. What I ended up finding with Redshift was I really had to massage the material to get what I wanted. But for him, not only did I want the subsurface scattering, but I also wanted the kind of gnarled parts of his face and everything to look really meaty. So that meant playing around with the specularity on the skin and, how much of that light is going to pour through. Yeah. So if we go back to my ZBrush, let's see, go back to ZBrush, you can see that a lot of that detail that you saw is sculpted in. If I can zoom in on it here, why don't I use my little 3D mouse? Yeah. So all that detail that you're seeing there is kind of sculpted in. On the leather on his helmet and their cowl, whatever, the baby birds and all that, that's all sculpted there. So it shows up even better. What I found is having the actual, the sculpt support the poly painting is only going to make the material look even more believable. So I actually did some renders last night, and when I say last night, I mean like late last night.
You might even call that this morning.
Exactly.
burning the candle on both sides.
You ever get that
Yes,
feeling when you're out all night, you know, you're roaming the streets and then you see the local barber and he's picking up his bread for the morning. You feel like a louse because you haven't been home yet. And he knows you haven't been home. You're wearing club clothes.
Let's see. All right, so let me turn this one on. Let me turn this one on, and let me turn this one on. All right, so I got this Hulk that I started a long time ago. I don't even want to talk about how long I started this thing, but I was like, all right, let me play around and see what I can get as far as some decent skin texture. And what you're looking at here, if you guys are new to Redshift or ZBrush or even rendering in general, the one on the left is just simply flooded with green, right? There's no poly painting involved, but the material is dialed in. So this is the same material that you see in the one that's all the way to the right, but the difference you're getting there is clearly, you know, that's the poly paint. So if we look down at his foot, for example, just zoom in here, like there's some nice stuff going on here, right? I really kind of went back and forth until I found something that didn't feel waxy, you know, but it still kind of felt like there was a translucency to it. And you can see that that is the material. This is the poly paint. And here's what happens when you combine the two. And the lighting scheme on all three of these is pretty much the same. Right.
And just to be sure, Mike Thompson, here we go. The middle one is the one that we're looking at as the final situation.
The middle one is basically a BPR. It's just like filled with a basic material.
Right.
And that's it.
Yeah.
So this is all poly painted. But it's interesting because like if we look at this, you know, there's areas in here that look kind of weird, but I was painting it as I had the material on. And then if we look at it with the material, it's you know, kind of better.
Yeah, so you're really working in conjunction with the actual material and then the poly paint as well to really bring the piece to life, because that's the aspect too. You know, I mean, you're really trying to get something that's really dialed in, because there's only so much in any render engine that I've ever worked with. You know, Redshift is no exception. The material only takes you so far. The rest of your model is going to absolutely have to, you know, really send it the rest of the way. In this case, this is a really cool technique, really bringing in that poly paint and really like pushing it. So it looks
100%.
beautiful, man.
Thanks, man. Thank you. Yeah. So, and you can see that there are things that now, if being the dude that's had ADHD all his life, I will 100%. This is why this Hulk isn't done, by the way, you guys. I will 100% go back in and probably punch up the poly paint on the veins, because if you look, like they're apparent here in the BPR, but if you look at the render, they kind of get lost a little bit, right?
Yeah.
They're in some of those places you can kind of see them, but that's just me having to go in now and push those colors a bit more to get that to stand out a little bit more.
Absolutely. Real quick, we have a question. Just that I want to definitely address it real quick verbally out the way before we get into it, and then I also wanted to kind of just go over some of the sliders real fast, if you don't mind, just so that people understand the sliders. So when you start talking about how you're working with the material, they'll know what those sliders do. So the first question is about the subscription. They have a legacy license of ZBrush, and they want to know if they're able to keep their 2022 license and move on to 2023. Yes, absolutely. If you own a perpetual license of ZBrush 2022, you will be able to keep that license as you move on. So if you move to subscription and then you cancel your subscription later, you still have your legacy 2022 perpetual license that you could fall back on. That's honored through your account. So when you log on to your Maxon account, you were asked at some point to just migrate the licensing over to your main account, but you will be able to download that version of ZBrush from your main license hub. So yes, you will be able to use your 2022 perpetual license of ZBrush that you purchased before moving to subscription. So hopefully that clarifies that. And let me go ahead and show my screen here, because I want to be able to showcase just some of these sliders real fast.
You're going to show some rendering right now?
I'm just going to show me over some sliders and give a little bit of example. And then I'm going to give it back to Mike, because I just want everybody to kind of see what's actually want to see what's happening there, so they understand the sliders a bit. So, whoop. Oh, give 1 second.
I'm digging those transitions, by the way.
That transition was awesome. Here, one second.
Straight fire right there.
Get stuff moving. Okay. Right. So real quickly, I just want to go over the sliders just so that everybody knows what they do and how it works. I got Earthquake here just as an example. You guys have I sneak peeked it last week, but real fast, if we look at the modifier. So in order to modify any Redshift material, you first have to have it selected. I have the skin material selected. And we have basically 5, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 6 different sliders. And without going through super technical stuff, the first one, which turns on the subsurface scatter in the first place, is the amount, is subsurface scatter amount. So that's just turning it on and off. And you have 0 to all the way to a solid 1, but there's a lot of decimals in between that. You have 5 decimal places. So right now, like this earthquake is set to 0.85. So once this is above 0, it is technically turned on. If you have any of these sliders adjusted, but the amount is at 0, you will not get any subsurface scatter because that's not turned on. The second one is the scale, how big or small the effect of the actual subsurface scatter is going to be on your model. So if you have a really large model, you may want to see about maybe blowing up the scale or downsizing the scale to see what works best and what gives you the overall effect. So in conjunction with turning it on, you have a scale that allows you to adjust how much subsurface scatter affects the model. And again, this is all a slider from 0 to 1. And these numbers, they're not set in stone. Any project based on its size and the amounts of light that you have interacting with your scene will definitely, give you different results. So as you're playing around with these, feel free, like Mike said, he massaged it a little bit. He really worked it just to see what fit the scene the best. Then you have your subsurface scatter phase. That is actually a slider where you can push subsurface scatter further or closer to the surface. So if you move the slider to the right, so positively from 0 to 1, that's actually going to push the subsurface scatter to the actual surface of like the skin, closer to the surface. If you push it negatively, it's actually going to kind of push it inwards and giving you more of a denser feel. So those are ways that you could play with that. You have samples, which you don't really need to mess with this one too much. This is just how much at render time, how many samples per pixels you're getting. And then subsurface scatter, all subtools. This is on or off. This basically means that the subsurface scatter, as it's being affected with the main material, could affect other materials as well. So if you don't want any like subsurface scatter happening on your, let's say, leather, but you have your skin next to it, you could see a little bit of an effect happening between all the subtools that is interacting with. So you can go ahead and kind of turn that off if you don't want it, turn it on, of course, if you do. And then you have your subsurface scatter mode. 0 is like the weakest mode. It's just a generalization of what it could be, but it's not really like realistic. And then you have mode 1, which is more realistic, but it's still not quite, like maybe it's a little bit more jelly, I would say, let's give it a kind of a technical term. And then you have mode 2, which is like if you want realistic skin, this is the approach you take. You put it on.
Hold on a second. You're saying jelly is it's a more technical term.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's technical for me. Come on.
You're looking at people searching in documentation for something called
I'm on jelly.
Dr. Science.
Is that a J or a G?
I don't want to bore anybody with mumbo jumbo. Now, basically, just again, like it's not. They're just different algorithms. 2 being the most realistic, 0 being the least realistic, and anything between. I would actually use subsurface scatter mode 1 if I was doing stylized characters. So if I had something like Big Hero 6 and I wanted a light subsurface scatter, but something that looks pretty interesting. I guess this is where jelly came in. So those are the modes you would play with. I default to 2 because a lot of my sculptures tend to lean a little bit away from stylization and more into the realistic effect. So I end up doing that. And those are all the sliders. Just wanted to cover those real quickly, just because I wanted everybody to see what was actually, kind of get a sense of what those were. Just a quick breakdown. And now we can move back to Mike because he has a lot of really cool techniques he wants to show. So take it away, Mike.
Thanks, man. Yeah, all that stuff is definitely critical, right? So I've been on the phone and texting with Ian quite a bit to figure out just how to wrap my mind around what I need to do for materials. And if I kind of go back to this Hulk material here, and I look, just to let you know, the ones that I kind of messed around with were mostly the amount and the scale, right? And the phase and the samples. And not just kidding. Those two, right? Samples and the scale and the amount, because you're kind of walking a fine line between getting something that looks really, really good when you don't have poly paint applied to it, but then when you apply your poly paint and do a render, you lose it, or it is, you know, the poly paint is very visible and you lose the effect of the subsurface. So by going in, and Ian taught me this kind of last week, right? Like the scale can be almost whatever I want it to be. I'm sorry, the amount can be almost what I want it to be, but the scale, I want to keep that like 0.0 something. And that kind of allows the poly paint to show up. Once you start pushing that scale up higher, you're going to get more of a subsurface effect, but it's going to take away from your paint, and that's counterproductive, I think. Phase also, same deal. I found like last night, 2:45 in the morning. I'm not going to say how late I was working on this, but when I was messing around with the Hulk and I was playing with the phase to just dial it in, I found that the higher I push the phase, you know, the more it brings that subsurface to the surface and makes it more pronounced. But then it's a very, like, you're walking a tightrope, because you do too much and it turns into a wax candle or jelly, as Ian said. That's the scientific word for it. But
it's
like
box and jelly.
Yeah, exactly. But you do too. I would have said gummy, but I'll take jelly. But yeah, you do too little, and it's like you might as well not have it turned on. So those were the things I was messing around with, in addition to figuring out how much of a specularity that I wanted on the surface. So so that's where that comes into play with that Hulk that I had. And if we go back to Photoshop really quickly, let's see, do I have?
Is it wrong that every time I see this, now I'm going to think of Beyonce?
Exactly. Let's see. All right. So I did a couple of renders here. Turn this on, and
I have to say, man, while you're pulling those up, I always really loved the look of just amazing subsurface scatter. Seeing that light coming through any model, it like really separates the the foreground, the background, and really brings your character to life. I always find that, like, when your character seems, just kind of cold or monotone, it just like it's lackluster, right? But then just sometimes subsurface scatters, boom, makes everything look alive. It's so cool.
It's true. And again, so I want to be like 100% transparent with this. You see what I did there, Louie?
But I'm
yeah. So I like with there's a lot of variables that are going to add to the success of your render, and another one is your HDR, because anybody that's ever used anything, any render engine that has HDRs, not only do you have to pick a really good one, and the one that works for one image may not work for another one. It takes different strokes. So you can, and then once you find one that's good, it's for me, I rotate the scene. So like if I go back to ZBrush here and I go to my light and background, turn on my background image, turn off the blur. For this one, if I look at the longitude, that's rotating around this, this image that I have here. And I usually do maybe 20% at a time. First, I'll do it in the positive direction, then I'll do it in the negative direction until I find something that looks really good with my lights off, right? So this, I was telling Ian before, like this technique that I use is kind of the same one that I used to use back in the old days when we were using, the key shot or whatever. So turn off my lights, find a good BPR, set up the lighting with only the, not BPR, sorry, HDR, set up the lighting so that I get a really compelling kind of a shadow and highlight side with only that. And then I'll bring in one of these extra lights, so like a rim or something like that, which will now give me a nice bounce light on the side. And all of this stuff, just so you know, like if you don't know who I am, I've been an illustrator for more than 25 years. And when I first turned to ZBrush, it was because I was working on G.I. Joe characters and like these DC Infinite Universe box art pieces. And I had to do all these guys, but, you know, I didn't know how the light kind of wrapped around all their gear and the clothes and all that. So I was like, I need a way to figure out how to comp something together and then throw a light source in it, get a good enough render that I can see what I can paint, right? And then I would go into Painter or Corel Painter or Photoshop, whatever, and paint that up. So that's when I started using ZBrush. Lo and behold, I enjoyed sculpting so much that I was like, oh man, okay, I want to sculpt stuff too.
Isn't that amazing? Like,
it's fun.
Yeah,
it's
you're
fun.
Coming from 2D background, like I dabbled a little bit myself, but I always found 3D to be so unique, and it's so cool to see somebody of your caliber coming in with a heavy, extensive illustration background and then adopting 3D in the insane way that you have. It's amazing.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Yeah. So it's been invaluable, right? Like it's just a tool that I would not have been able to make it without it. I don't know what I just did there, but anyway, yeah, once I have those lights set up and I get, let me get out of here, go back to this thing, and I get something I like, then I move on to the poly painting. So piece that I worked on a while ago in Stylus League was this Judge Dredd versus Judge Death piece.
So good.
And I just kind of blocked in the colors. So I was like, you know what? It would look really cool now if I did a you know, made a nice Redshift render. So there's only like a couple of pieces here where I actually went in and got some good poly painting going on. I think this kind of bat thing on his arm is one of them. But the rest of it is just pretty much just blocks of color. So what I'm going to do, if you guys will indulge me, is I'm just going to do some poly painting.
Please, of this. Are you kidding? By all means.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. And I'll tell you too, like, as I said, you know, since I was a kid, I've been a painter, so that it kind of helps now to translate that into ZBrush. And part of the reason, not to be a commercial or anything, but part of the reason why I love working in ZBrush as opposed to other packages is I'm not a 3D person. You know, I'm not very good when it comes to traditional box modeling or even good at all. So having things like ZModeler and being able to render right inside of the package allows me to get comps out to clients really quickly. So I was telling Ian the other day, I did a turnaround for a client the other day, and I did it with a BPR. First, I showed them the Redshift of it, and then I was like, okay, well, let me make this minor change. I did a BPR, and they were like, yeah, you got to do that in Redshift. The client doesn't even understand this.
Oh, yeah, that was like, man, look at that! Like immediately, like that happened. For me, that's so comforting, because that was, you know, again, a lot of what we've been doing, especially with this update, is speeding up workflow improvement, right? Trying to get artists to be more creative and get their stuff out quicker, even if it's just an iteration. So it's really cool that helped you out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And another thing for me too is I'm not a big, like I have dirty UVs. I can't wait. Like, so we did an interview with Raphael, like Louie will love this. And one of the things that he talked about is doing these like dirty UVs or trash UVs. So he does like these just good enough UVs and he spins them into gold. So for me, like, I don't like spending a lot of time on remeshing and making really, really good UVs. I'm not using any of my stuff for any games or animation. It's always going to be a 3D print. And then I'll, you know, turn it into a statue. So anything that's going to cut my workflow and keep me from wasting time is a good thing. So I can't wait to show. He's going to talk about that on our show this month sometime. Looking forward to that.
There's so much extension there with that process as well that goes in. When you mentioned like UVs and 3D printing, a lot of people don't realize that there's, you know, fundamentally it gives you access to things like displacement maps to push things
and textures and all that. Yeah.
Texture, yeah, and that to me is like an underutilized maybe sort of pathway that people don't really know about. So I'm glad you mentioned it at this point.
Absolutely. I'll tell you what, I would not mess with them at all if I didn't use them for textures, and the textures look so good that the fact now that we can do things like mark seams with you know, with the new features in 2023, and lay out just the UVs a little cleaner. And like I kind of do a Pavlovich thing where after I you know, flatten my UVs, I'll use the Gizmo to align them. And like Daniel Bell showed this really dope technique to make sure that everything is facing the right way. So just, you know, gems.
Yeah, painting the directions on there. We had that featured at the ZBrush Summit as well.
That's where I learned it.
Yeah,
Yes,
that
sir.
was great. That was really, really influential sort of workflow, and I'm sure we'll see more of it.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. So these little elbow pieces, I just, you know, kind of laid these fingers out and multiplied them and rotated them. But you can see they're just kind of flat filled, which look all right. But like now I would go in and probably add some texture to the leather parts. You know, and I could either do that by making a quick UV for it. Do I have this in polygroups? Let me see. I do not, but easy enough to make, right? I'm not going to do that now. I'll do that in my stream next week. But you see, everything has their own polygroups. So what I'll do is I'll just get to some poly painting. I have a brush which I made with a buddy of mine. That is very good for painting. Actually, it's good for sculpting, but painting as well.
Oh, cool.
And I just kind of go in. I use it with Lazy Mouse, and I can get like these really nice, clean.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, so let's just size this down a bit. Maybe turn down the opacity a little bit.
Yeah, that Lazy Mouse with that cranked up a little bit is so it's so useful, man. I mean,
I love it.
These people could drink all the coffee they want.
I do. I got you covered.
I know I don't, and I still jitter. But
Yeah,
with that, I'm a man saved. Found my salvation.
Got my gallon right here.
So, yeah, for me, what I'll usually do is just kind of block in the these areas. Now, let's do something. I'm gonna undo this real quick. Ian showed me something that was kind of dope. Another feature. This is like ZBrush is one of those things, much like Photoshop, where you can use it for years and years and not know everything that it does. So what I'm gonna do here is zoom out. Let's see. Zoom out. Go to Z plugin and go to AO.
Towards the top a little bit more, above bevel.
Oh, ambient occlusion. All right. So now if I hit compute, what that's going to do is use my lighting and go and find those shadows for me. And I can play with, you know, the amount, but you can see already, like there's my shadow. So last night, what I was doing is if I wanted more, I would either play with those sliders or I would just go to my masking adjustments and do things like, you know, boost the mask, you know, and maybe sharpen it a little bit or something like that, right? Which is kind of cool. And then I don't have to go in and paint all of those little areas if I want to. So I'll undo the boost because I kind of actually liked it where it was.
Yep, and to lean in on that for those of you who don't know, that ambient occlusion Z plugin is actually providing you a mask that you can, like Mike is doing right now, is actually manipulative. So you make that mask and then you can invert it, you can paint with it, you can fill colors, blur it out, lots of little cool stuff. And like we learned last week with Paul Gaber, you can even use, you know, turn on a layer and then make your ambient occlusion mask, turn off layers, and then you can have the layer of your ambient occlusion mask that you can turn on at any point. You can really start stacking features like that, which is cool.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Save real quick.
Oh yeah, autosave. Further away.
So the autosave is a double edged blade. Like I love to complain about how I was like, oh man, I was just in the flow and autosave came on, but I literally will not save for hours if it doesn't come on. So
Hey, listen, don't you know what I mean? Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. You can thank my pain personally for that feature. There's nothing like having a deadline for something and having something happen, and then coming into the office the next day and saying, "Why don't we have an autosave feature?" And the team says, "Well, why didn't you ask for it earlier?" And then all of a sudden, by noon, we have an autosave, and there's your quick save.
Nice.
That's the history of quick save in a nutshell. My tears were for you, Mike T. My tears were for you.
Hey, listen, man. It saved my behind on more than one case, so I'm not mad at it at all.
No, I'm glad you're using it.
Very cool. Very cool. So how long does it take you to paint something like this? You know, this big piece. So like when you just go nuts and lose track of time like I do?
Yeah, once I kind of figure out what I want to do, then it's good to go. Like it's always, kind of doing it in front of people is difficult. I think that doing all the streams for you guys kind of prepared me for even having a show like Stylist League, because I don't like, by and large, like I don't like working in front of people because it looks like garbage till it doesn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The good thing is I'm not the only one who has said that, so I don't get embarrassed about it. But then when it starts to come together, it's pretty sweet. So
listen, a quiche doesn't look too appealing before it bakes either. I mean,
or after. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. I mean, that's part of the reason why, like, I was so excited to be brought onto this training team, because, I think more artists, with the more we talk with each other and collaborate with each other, we start realizing that, everything starts off looking really rough and nasty and just not as good, but you have to, learn to refine and take your time and patience with it. And the more you put into it, the more you learn. And just like anything else, eventually you just repeat those processes enough that muscle memory kicks in, and then you start knowing what tricks work and what tricks don't work. And the more you learn, it's like and for me, that's what like being a professional really like starts separating themselves, because they start learning the things that do and don't work. They failed a lot, and then they're like, you know what, that never worked for me. I'm never going to use that technique again. I'm going to do the thing that worked, that got the results. And that's just experience and time. And it's really awesome to be able to share those experiences, because it encourages more artists to feel free to fail in order to succeed in the long run.
Absolutely. And we didn't have that. Like when I started off as an artist, we didn't have a support system like we have now, right? Like you just kind of figured it out. And if you were lucky, you figured it out on the job, or you get yelled at by your boss, but you didn't have these, Discords and YouTube and all this other stuff. Like back in my day, we didn't have all that stuff. So it's pretty sweet now that you don't have to learn things on your own, and you also don't have to suffer alone either, right? Like you can learn how to fail like everybody else and how to succeed like everybody else.
Yep, exactly. Look at that. I mean, you painted that really quickly using the ambient occlusion technique and a little bit of TLC. That's awesome.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So, I mean, the other thing I'll do too now is like the shadows that are kind of, I'm painting in on the sides here. They will appear on their own with the lighting, but a trick I kind of learned from painting statues and stuff like that is I like to fake some of that as well. So if I have, let's say I'm keying, a character that the head goes down into the shirt, and I know that there's going to be like a shadow that kind of casts around his neck just to make it look more dimensional. Yeah. I'll paint that shadow in a little bit, and then the light will catch some of it, and then the paint will catch the rest. So it looks a little better than just kind of leaving it up to whatever your lighting is.
That's awesome. That.
Oops, I'm painting on the fingers. Don't do that.
And of course, too, anybody in the chat, if you guys have any questions for Mike Thomas, myself, or Louie, please feel free. This is live at the moment, and it will be recorded and put on our YouTube just like all other streams. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to fire them away, whether it be new features or any questions about what Mike's doing. Don't hesitate. It is good.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to know, like, you guys kind of labeled this as the AO, or not AO, the SSS stream, I had some hurdles that I had to overcome to figure stuff out. So if anybody has any questions about anything that, you know, that isn't working for you, maybe between Ian and Louie and myself, we can answer those too. What happened to Paul? Wasn't Paul supposed to be here?
No, Paul. No, not today. Paul's next week.
Okay.
Next week we have a renowned jewelry sculptor, the name of Nacho, coming on and showing some jewelry rendering techniques and probably some modeling techniques as well using ZBrush. So that's really cool. More to come on that for sure. Oh, Paul says he's here in the background. Hello, Paul. Cool.
A lot of times I'll lay down colors too, kind of stronger than I want, and then I can flood the whatever the thing is with a solid color and unify those. I have some old ZBrush lives where I did a Bishop Polypaint, and I showed that off. You guys want to go dig in the crates a little bit?
We got Nathan Loff in the comments wants to know where can I get one of those sweet lids? I think he's referring to your hat.
Well, you know what? If you go to sleeve.Com, we have a store. We have some gear, hoodies, hats.
There you go.
Gloves. Thank you, by the way.
Yeah.
On Internal Games, there's a question too. I was wondering, was there no rotation option in the geometry tab? They're in size or position of rotation. Just wanted to clarify, are you talking about HDR? Or are you talking about in ZBrush in general? Because Mike has a custom UI that's going on, but if you're asking for like the rotation scale and size buttons at the top left-hand side of a default option, there is your rotation scale and move options. And you can also do W, E, R, or Q for all of those in conjunction with the Gizmo. Oh yeah, it's also A-Cube. A-Cube is here. A-Cube says, hi, what's up, everybody? A-Cube, say hi to A-Cube. She's also one of our ZBrush Live artists and also just an amazing person, artist. Say hi to her. High five. Just have to.
She was one of our first guests on the show.
Yes,
also.
That's right. She jumped on Stylist League. That's awesome. Yeah, man.
Smoke Bradley and I, by the way, not nice at all.
No, she's fast. She's fast.
Yeah.
I'll when she streams, I'll be in the I'll be in the chat saying hi and stuff like that. I'll look down, I'll look back up, and she has something like, how'd you do that?
Yeah, that's crazy. Plus, I love how. Okay.
Yeah. No, go ahead, man.
No, I was gonna say I love how she'll take something and almost like break the geometry and then find the forms. Pretty dope.
Yeah.
Stretch it out and beyond belief and then turn it into something is pretty dope.
Cool. Well, we have a question from Dope Pope. What's up? Do you create UVs for every subtool or combine them first, before, and after posing?
I only create UVs when I need to add textures. So for the organic stuff, unless I'm gonna do, even for the skin, I really kind of just can do it. But when it comes to like clothing and things like that, I make it as needed. Dope Pope, if you don't know, is like the most amazing Godzilla and King of Monsters sculptor that I've ever seen, by the way. If you don't know, you better ask somebody.
Everybody will follow him too. So we have another question as well from a Nathan. I would be interested to hear you talk more about approaching Polypaint from your background in illustration. Seems like the ZBrush controls for them and coloring, they feel it's a little limited, but open the door, Mike. How does that work for you with your background illustration coloring?
So it's interesting because for me, I actually enjoy the process a bit more than maybe other applications that give you more control and options and things like that. I know that, you know, there's some other stuff that you can use as well, but I love to do everything as much at least as I can in ZBrush. So, you know, this painting and just kind of rotating around, this to me doesn't even feel like, I think part of the reason why I came to ZBrush is that it doesn't feel like I'm working in a 3D space, right? Like I'm rotating around the thing, but I'm pretty much doing what I would do in Photoshop or Painter or something like that, just on a tool. So I like it.
Yeah, nice. There's also too there's a lot of options as well with your poly paint. Something that I love to do, so a little gym, is if you go on under the tool menu and go under poly paint, you have an adjust feature. And so if you poly painted something and you're working it, and it's just like any painting technique, when you're painting. I like to paint in what I call layers. Like I paint my base coat, and then I come in with a darker tone or a lighter tone, and I like to just paint on top until I get something I like. But sometimes we come back to our projects and it's like, well, I want it to be a little bit vibrant or a little bit more darker. So if you go into the tool menu, poly paint, and underneath that hit adjust, you can actually adjust all your colors, and you have full RGB, HSV control as well as gamma control. So you can start really controlling the different colors and overall look. You can also mask by poly paint, which is really a great feature. So if you want to be able to maybe soften a transition between one color to another, you can actually go in through the mask options, which is also on the tool menu, and mask by poly paint and select very specific poly paints. So there's a lot more control in those areas as well that I definitely encourage you to explore as an artist. But great question. Nice. Cool. Perfect. We got a lot of chatter. So one second. Very cool, dude. You're painting like a madman. I love it. It's awesome. But what's so important too is that you used you spent the time painting, and then it really shined through on the actual render, which is so cool.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it just I've tried to use Subsurface before, and even some other like, what is it, emission and things like that. And if you don't have anything really laid down, it doesn't look that exciting to me, you know.
Yeah.
So I do notice that when I start to poly paint, I have to boost the light brighter than I normally would just to see what's going on.
Hey, listen, I want to address the elephant in the room, which is I want to give you a nod as well as an artist and an illustrator and sculptor. All the painting and all the rendering in the world isn't going to help it if the sculpture is sort of lacking. And I want to pay a tribute to the testament that is your sculpture work here.
Thank you, my friend.
The personality in your hands alone is to be marveled at. I mean, look at that Judge Dredd right hand right there. The one in the background. I mean, there's so much action and lively sort of personality in the sculpture, and the surface is the way you've managed the transitions for the wrinkles across the sleeves and things. So if people are watching and like just getting started, it's really actually fundamentally important that they work to establish very strong forms and values for the transitions of surfaces and things like that before even sort of considering painting and rendering, with a nod to sort of the traditional sort of approaches that we've come from.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
So, little known fact, Louie Tucci, I have one hand that I sculpt over and over and over again. It's what I like to call the arthritic hand.
There it is, the Mike.
That's my hand. That's kind of my signature, is that the same hand over and over again, whether it be Venom or Death or whoever. So.
There you go.
That's a generational thing, perhaps. We grew up with that kind of.
Yes, sir.
Like this, right? We know who did that. On the coming at you like this.
Mm-hmm. Fred G. Sanford hand, I like to call it.
Hell, you won't.
Oh, Mike, here's a good question for you too from Henry. Is it possible to draw stitching on, say, a sneaker, for example? Could use the stitchings, have polygroups, and draw them out like sneaker and geo. Like, how would you go about stitches? Because we saw in that zombie cap render, you had some stitches all over the place.
Totally. Let's see. Let's go back to the zombie cap frame. Oops, that's not it. This one frame. Yeah. All right. So what I tend to do for stitching is I do make polygroups. Zoom in a little bit on this guy. Yeah. So I will take something like this, the cap here, and we can say this is a shoe. I'll just clone it. Come over here. I think I do have lower sub D levels. So I'm just going to duplicate this and then step down, solo. All right. So here's my low sub D, right? And you can see I have my polygroups and everything. So it's pretty clean. So let's say I wanted a stitch that kind of travels around the edge of this green area here. I just solo this out. And because I have one that's high topology there, I'll just, I'll delete higher. Okay. And then now what I can do is I use this so much, I have it kind of pinned down here, but I'll just frame the mesh like so. And you can see I have my little dotted line there. And now I can go into my brushes. I came up from the fashion industry. Like that's how I got started. I used to do t-shirts, like create t-shirts back in the day. So I made a bunch of stitches. Go to my brushes. To clothing. Stitches. All right. So I have my, here's a master, right? So like I have a zigzag stitch, double needle, single needle chain stitch. And so I'll grab one of these, right? And then depending upon the size of my brush, it's going to affect how large that stitch is. And if I just come and click on it and turn off the Polypaint, you can see that it's made the stitches where I want them. So let's say, I don't want them right on the edge there. What I would do, maybe, let's delete that. Because I have stuff that's hidden, I can shrink this, I can shrink the topology here. So maybe I'll just shrink it by 1 and then I'll frame it. And then I'll just click on it. Right. And you see everything came back and it's a little further out. So I can continue to do that. Let's shrink it again. Now frame, now click. Okay. So maybe this is kind of more what I want. And you can see in some places it gets a little weird sometimes because my topology isn't perfect, but that's as easy as just kind of grabbing that, that stitch and moving it over, whatever. So now I will delete the guide and you can see that I have the stitches there. So this is how I make stitches for shoes and, gear and everything. Over here, it got crazy. So maybe rather than using the existing topology, I would just kind of draw out a mask and then polygroup that and then polish by feature. So let me just show you that real quick. Let's undo that. Pro tip too, after you make these stitches, split unmasked. So then that way you can get them because you have like a million little stitches here, which is kind of crazy. So there's that. But like, let's say I want this ear and I want it to be clean. I can come over here. Let's maybe, I can do it this way, right? I'll just go over to my mask lasso. Okay. This just kind of mask area that I want. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then I will group that. And it looks like crazy right now, right? It's okay. So Also, I don't want that back part, so let me undo that, get rid of that back part. I have that. So hide the green. One way to do this without tearing up the topology that's around it is making an edge loop first. So first, let me let it do its autosave thing.
Wait, I got to do the autosave.
Reminds me of that scene from The Matrix. He's out doing his Superman thing.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
All right, so now I have an edge loop. It looks crazy here, but again, another thing that I learned from Daniel Bell. All roads lead to Daniel Bell. If you don't know who Daniel Bell is, do yourself a favor and stalk him like I do. Don't do that. All right, so there's that. Now I can kind of come over to Polish by Features and open that circle up, and then I can slide it. And look at that. That's pretty, Louie. What you know about that, baby? Clean.
Look at that.
You're waking up.
Right.
I'm in here typing with these people in the chat.
That's clean. All right. So now what I can do is I can say frame mesh. Right. Yep. Now I bring back the thing. Now we're getting into it. Right. Now I go back to my brush.
You want to real quick. You lost a couple. You want to show that one more time?
Oh yeah, sure.
Super slow mo.
Okay,
back that up.
All right. Back it on up. All right. So the first thing I did was I made this poly group. I just masked it and turned it into a group. Right. Group. No. I forget what button does the group again. What?
Control W does the.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, it was acting crazy. All right, so I made it into a group.
Do me a quick favor. Press the F key real quick.
F.
Press it again. Okay, perfect.
You want it there?
Yeah. No, you can just go ahead.
Okay. So there.
One thing. Sorry.
Cool. So there is my group. I'm gonna hide the rest of the mask. The group is looking real janky right now, but it's okay. So I made an edge loop, and again, if you guys are, I do it too fast. The things that I use a lot, I have pinned to my UI. If you haven't yet, check out Pablo Munez has a video on customizing your UI. It's the best. In fact, I pretty much aped what he did for mine and just put the things that I use where I want them. So I'm just going to edge loop. I'll add an edge loop to this right now.
You aped?
Yeah, stole it.
No, I can't believe I haven't heard someone say that in a long time.
Yep. All right. So now I have this. Now there's two crazy kind of like edge loops there that nobody likes. However, if you go to your Polish by Features and open the little circle here and then drag it, look at that. Boom. Yep. Right. And the reason why I made that edge loop is I didn't want to completely pull this geometry like really kind of crazy. It doesn't matter because we're not going to use this one anyway. This is only going to be used for making stitches. So I could have tore it up if I wanted to. But like this is another, like I could do it around the eyes too. That's a good place to put it as well.
Yep. And for those of you who don't know, the Polish by Features, it's under the tool menu under deformation. And then that little bubble, it's right towards you look at the slider, the top right of the slider, little bubble. It's usually closed. You open that up, and that's just a powerful, real quick.
I'm not going down the rabbit hole of it being Polish with the capital P because we'll be here all day.
That's true. So now that's done, and I will just say frame mesh. Now I have my frame again.
Yeah.
And then I just click on my stitches, and look where they are. They're kind of nice there. So what I would do is split hidden, or split unmasked. Sorry, like that. Mm-hmm. Let's turn off this mask and go back to the other one. Turn that one on, and then let's turn off solo, and you can see all the stitches that I have here. So you might be asking yourself, hey, Mike, why do you have two sets of stitches here? One of them I really don't care about. right? So what I can do is I can click on this, come over here. I can isolate these. Why does that look like that? Is that because there's Boolean turned on? Hold on a second. That looks crazy.
And while you're doing that, the main difference between an open and closed circle, the easiest way to explain it is think of them as a different algorithm. One performs slightly different. So in this case, a closed circle gives you a more subtle polish by features, and then the open circle is like a very heavy polish by features. So in this case, if you would have had the circle closed and even pulling it at 100%, it wouldn't have had such a strong effect. So each slider or button that has that bubble or the word dynamic usually provides a different algorithm of the same feature.
Yeah, most typically just think of it being more intense, the impact of it on the surface or on the asset just being intensified.
Maybe see something. Maybe there's noise applied to this. I bet you that's what it is.
Cool, man.
Surface. Yeah, that's why. Aha. Ian.
Yeah, you got it.
Try to tell me that's not noise. It is noise. All right. So
I'm just here for the laughs. I mean, I'm not going to interfere with this show. I mean,
throw all the blames at me. Throw all the blame.
Having fun. I'm just like, I'm looking at the chat here. This is incredible.
I'm the punching bag right here, just right at the Z. Okay, right at the Z.
I want to stop for a second here, though. In all seriousness, Marcio Ferreira is asking a very important question. He says, do you start with a neutral pose or do you like to work in a dynamic pose? I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to let you take it away, Mike T from LT.
You do know I don't like symmetry. So I get out of symmetry as soon as possible and try to figure out my pose because it helps me get a better sense of the piece.
There's so much value in that. The dynamic aspects of the muscles in contraction and extension, the volumes, the value of the way that the shapes are being formed. There's a natural language that's going to happen to answer the question even more, to compound it and really beat the horse to death. There's so much more happening there. If you start, you can definitely start in a static pose, but I think to your point, like if it's an exaggerated pose for all the years that I've been a professor and teacher, if it's a grossly exaggerated pose like a Spider-Man or some of this Judge Dredd stuff you were showing, then probably it's best to start in in a non-symmetrical pose to address the issues with the musculature.
Definitely.
Major points of contraction and extension. So that's the big answer right there for Marcio Ferreira. Hope you're doing good.
That's the very smart and well thought out answer for my I don't like it.
Yep, there you go.
I'm giving you
not just a pretty face here, gorillas. Here we go.
I'm giving you the McDonald's version. Louie's giving you Ruth Chris.
Yeah.
Speaking of Ruth Chris, I need to plug this laptop in. It's going to die. Give me a second.
Yeah, go ahead, Louie. Go ahead. And just to even touch on that just a little bit further, a lot of us who sculpt for 3D printing statues, for toys that are non-articulated, that have nothing but the expression that's really driving the piece. At the end of the day, you could be the best sculptor in the world, but if the dynamic is lost, the piece just doesn't have that wow factor that you're always driving for. So it's really a good idea to practice and study asymmetrical sculpting because, like everyone said already, muscles respond in a way that's different and unique. When you flex your bicep, your left bicep might be flexing, but your right one's going to do something different if it's stretched. So the study of anatomy is really important there, and it really drives the piece home, really just polishing it up the rest of the way. So yeah,
that is
especially
true.
if you want to get into toys, asymmetrical sculpting practice.
That is absolutely true. So I want to show you guys something that before I got it into the pose, I had no idea what it was going to look like. And then once it got in there, everything came together. So let's see if I can turn all this stuff on.
Yeah, I like that.
I think there's value in that, Mike Thompson. I think there's value in that, not knowing, like in a way, almost kind of like stumbling forward without getting too crazy. Let's not get offside. I mean, there is some value to have it not be so contrived and then explore certain things. But do you ever use like a thumbnail sketch? Because most of the stuff that I do is like thumbnail based. I'll be like, okay, let me figure this out first on paper real quick.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, so that's the process for me anyway, right? Because like I used to have to do these really clean line drawings, and I've done that a lot. In fact, I got kind of yelled at on a stream for Corel one time because I had my drawing and then I went right into the paint, and people were asking me, "Hey, why aren't you drawing? Do you know how to draw?" I'm like, "Dude, I've drawn for 30 years. Like, I don't want to. Do you want to watch me draw? Or you want to watch me paint?" So, but I'll do a quick thumbnail sketch, and then use that to jump right into ZBrush, and then I'll do basically a kind of a ZBrush sketch to figure out what I'm doing sometimes, and then use that to inform the final pose. But this is one where it was a sideshow thing that I did, where when the characters were in their A pose, they just felt so static and not interesting whatsoever. But they provided me with a piece of concept art, and then once I started getting them into the pose, it just felt really, really dope, right? Like there's not a boring angle on this, and I really, it's one of those ones where I loved breaking symmetry on this.
Yeah, right there. Turn it just to the back shot again. Let's get that back shot right there. Look at that mole right there.
That. Yeah.
And think about that. Like in 360 degrees, that's not even the focal point, but it just again speaks to your talent to be able to sort of have that intention, even right, like at that angle where it's like the process of sculpture is like a 360 degree sort of visceral experience of the whole.
Yeah. I like to kind of consider it like a Rubik's cube. It's easy to get one side that looks great, but then if you can get them all, it just feels so much more interesting, I think.
For me, like the guilty pleasure would come from like what we're talking about is the extension of even just the most rudimentary like thumbnail design. I'll even hold it up. All I do is like sketch these doodles in the background while we're in meetings, and I'm not doing that now, obviously, but I think there's like this unequivocal like beauty to some of those things that are done so rapidly, and the real trick actually for all the people watching around the world is like trying to capture yes, Mike is a beast, trying to capture the wild nature of that original like thumbnail sketch in the space of the 3D sculpt. Like that is if you're wondering like what makes people tick like at this level, I think it's fair to say at this point we can speak with each other openly as contemporaries, like the capturing of that visceral nature of that initial like pen sketch is like the most challenging thing that you might actually embark on. And if you're out there listening, like you think, oh, what could make me better? Chase the wildness of that original like thumbnail and try to capture that in the sculpture. That to me is like unattainable. Like this, I feel like the Silver Surfer looking for like a planet,
Nice.
Absolutely.
It's true.
Mike, did you these pieces are beautiful, man. I mean, have you? It's been awesome to even just work with you these last couple of weeks and really like dive in deep with rendering and having these pieces come to life. So definitely excited to have you come on and showcase this stuff. And it's so important to really think about the end game of your piece, as an artist, and then start like you've been doing with this poly painting and really just kind of seeing how it's working within this new engine and kind of giving it a go and then finding out what techniques work and don't. And so it's invaluable to have you on here today and sharing those information. So thank you so much, dude.
Thanks for having me, man. Like really, I love coming on here. I'm a fan of all you guys and also the the product in general, right? Like it's funny because I use Corel Painter, Photoshop, and ZBrush, and I'm in them all the time. So I spent so many hours in this, and I love being able to keep learning new stuff, man, and pass it on to cats. And if you like that, check out the Stylist League Friday nights.
Absolutely.
YouTube.com/Stylist League.
Yep. All right. Before we go, real quick, we had a question that did come in about Gizmo rotation and stuff, and I said in the chat that I'd actually just show it real fast. So I'm going to steal the screen from you real quick, Mike, just so I can go ahead and.
You're going already?
Just giving this question a vibe, and then we're gonna come back in and see if there's anything else Mike wanted to really dive into. But real fast, let's go into this.
We're having fun, I guess.
Yeah, that's what happens, man. So we had a question about rotation with the object and an object in space. I'm just gonna solo this. I'm gonna solo out the body real fast, something like this. Here we go. So when I mentioned in the chat about Gizmo rotation, at the very top in the default UI, we have our edit and draw, but then you have move, scale, and rotate. What's really cool about ZBrush, what separates us from everyone else, is the fact that with your Gizmo here, all of that is active at the same time. So yes, you could come up here and say, I want to scale that and then use that, which really worked back in the day when we didn't have a gizmo and we had a transpose, which if I hit Y on the keyboard, I can switch between gizmo and transpose. So this really worked in conjunction with being able to scale with the transpose tool, or rotate with the transpose tools, or move with the transpose tools, right? But now we have the gizmo. If I hit Y again, this is what's default. This is all active at the same time, so that you don't really have to come up here and select each one, or even hotkey shortcut ER, or W or Q to shut that off. So again, W activates gizmo, Q deactivates it, but E also activates gizmo because they're tied to the move, scale, and rotate. But all you need to do is just utilize that. The second thing is that when you start, I'm going to try to zoom in here just so it's a little interesting to see. But when you start rotating, you'll notice a number just at the bottom of the gizmo. And what this number is giving you on the rotation side, it's actually giving you angles or degrees. So if I wanted to snap this, right, let's say I wanted to get a 45-degree angle, right, I would hold shift, and now the number on the bottom is there's 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 35, 45. It snaps in 5-degree increments. And if I let go of shift, I can do all the way to 4 decimal points increments. So that's the number in which you would recognize as an angle. If I were to scale, since this gizmo is seeing the subtool as a value of 1, as I start to scale, you'll notice at the bottom it says 1 point and then a bunch of numbers. And so it's a factor of 1 at that point. So you're scaling up in small increments. So that's where you'd see those numbers. It's right below the gizmo. And same with moving in position. It's telling you from world center, it's telling you how much you're moving it negatively or positively, depending on where it's actually being placed. And then with some new gizmo stuff with 2023, before 2023, you could always just alt tap and have your gizmo off here in space. But now if I click shift to that gizmo, I can actually change camera perspective. So if I'm like, I need to sculpt on his bicep, but I want to get close to that, shift click face into that bicep, sculpt it. If I want to get over to his chest, alt tap, hold shift, and then press the arrow, and now I'm facing that direction. So really cool addition that's going to help find the angle in which you want to look for. That's the back of his ear. So little stuff like that. But all of that information is built in with the gizmo. So I wanted to just cover that real quickly. And I'm going to throw it back to Mike. If there was anything else you wanted to showcase or talk about with your poly painting and Redshift, go right ahead. But
absolutely. So I just wanted to show you guys before we get out of here what the poly paint on this guy looked like before I applied the material. I think it's important to see what we're working with here. So it looks kind of gnarly, first of all, but if
it looks awesome.
Thanks, man. Thanks, man. It's a face only a mother could love.
That's it, man. That's it.
So the baby birds got their spot and everything up there. But if we look at this is a basic material that I went and tweaked the settings on to just make it pop some more. If I go to the regular basic material, it should be a little lighter, right?
Yeah.
And now I want to show you what this looks like when I load the actual material that I used, because it looks crazy before you render it. Let's see. Let me pick something I don't mind losing here. And then I'm going to say load. And I'm going to say Redshift.
And that's important. Everybody who's playing with materials, don't forget you could save out your materials and use them time and time again.
Yeah, that is true. So I think it's this one. All right. So if we're looking at this now, you see how flat it got? Like, it's very difficult to see what's going on here because it just is. If we go back to the basic material, like, boom, look at all that. You can see it all. So I would just say that as you're poly painting, maybe have yourself, and you can see I painted in the shadows and stuff. I did all this stuff before Ian showed me that nice little AO masking trick. But I would definitely paint in all your details with your material of choice, whether it be the skin shade or basic or whatever. and then start playing around with your SSS. And then you might have to go back and forth until you get it exactly the way you want. Because like right now in his clothes, I'm going in and painting in the, you know, the shadow where the muscle is and stuff like that, just to make it pop, you know.
There's so much there as well. Like when we go back to the concept of masking, if we look at masking by cavity, for instance, and using Polypaint with mask by cavity and blurring the masks, I think that a lot of people could benefit from that workflow as well, as the detail on the surfaces of the assets start to accelerate into spaces of complexity, and also isolating that into sort of spaces that roll off into other places. So that gets really into closely approximations of like painting, darkest darks. If you think about it as a painter, like starting with your darkest darks and moving into your sort of mids and lighters, it can really be something that's more manageable mentally to work that way. I love that transition; just blew my mind.
Thanks, man. But yeah, you see, this is like gross, which we love, and that's you know, that's the long and short of it. It's a whole lot of and full disclosure, this was a lot of patience and me going back and forth and knowing that I would have to be on here with you guys with, you know, put my hind parts on the line once again to deliver. And so this is a whole lot of late hours and tweaking it to get it right. So I would just say be patient if you can. And then once you have something you like, save the material. Definitely save it.
Yeah. And that's why we're having these streams first, because we knew that, you know, Redshift was a different edition. We wanted to give it a good amount of attention because we understand that, you know, when we put anything new into ZBrush, the more in depth that feature, the more of a learning curve there is. And we definitely wanted to give that enough credence. So that's why these last few streams have been dedicated to showcasing the render aspect and how each artist who has adopted it has been really coming in and figuring out the aspects, you know. And like we had mentioned before on the presentation day, it's the first iteration of Redshift. We have a lot of ideas and stuff we want to try to help make things that are just, you know, amazing tools brought to artists so that artists can just get in and start dialing things in as quick as possible. So we always appreciate everyone who comes in and shows their support and love for the software, because we're artists trying to make the best software we can for everyone. So again, Mike, this is amazing. This is awesome. Dude, sick render. And
thanks, bro.
I love it, man. So
thanks, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Cool.
It's like the love child between Red Skull and Captain America. It's almost like, it's like, what if, as it says on your shirt. Oh, look what I did there.
I so can't wait for a live action version of. I love the Marvel Zombies comics. I can't wait for a live action.
Me too. Actually, I agree with you.
Yep. All right, I feel another zombie cap coming on my world. You're inspiring me, Mike. Every time I talk to you, it's just more inspirations.
Thanks, bro. Thank you, man.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, if that's going to pretty much wrap it up for today. Again, thank you to Mike Thompson and all the work that he's doing, and of course his Stylist League. And just go check out Mike. Just go check him out. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. If you like today, you're going to love tomorrow. So again, thank you so much, guys, and thank you for the questions. It's awesome.
1 second here, Ian. I want to draw attention. You guys worked so hard on preparing for this. Thank you both for the intent and the energy that you put into this presentation. A lot went on to make this seem as smooth and seamless as it has been. And I just wanted to tell you how much fun I had with both of you. So before you sign us off, Ian, just thank you both for having me here in the circumstance to be able to talk about these wonderful things that we all love so much. And take it away, Ian Robinson. Take us home and take us out.
Just thank you guys, everyone. And next week we're going to have Nacho coming on, same time, same channel, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We're going to be showing Redshift and jewelry, and that's the last stream for the Redshift streams. Then after that, this time frame is my usual time where I come on and teach ZBrush and run projects. I do a lot of different pipelines and structures. I do prep a lot of my stuff for 3D printing as well. So after next week, which is the last Redshift one, I'll be back to sculpting from 10 a.m. to noon. So if you want to come in and see how I work and some of the stuff I do, and also just get, you know, your questions answered since I'm on the training team, feel free to chime in, answer those questions. And yeah, that's about it. So just thank you, everyone, again. And I would love to see you guys next week. And for that, Mike.
And the jewels.
I'll be back next Thursday.
All right. There you go. Yes, Mike, Thursday. Are you
Right,
streaming,
right.
Mike? Are you streaming bi-weekly or are you streaming weekly? What's your schedule?
It's mostly bi-weekly.
Ah.
This month is crazy. Yeah. I'll be back, and you know, I'm gonna be bringing Bradley with me. So for all the people who are like, "Hey, you missed my question in the chat," Bradley will be on with me, and he'll be kind of fielding the chat and feeding them to me, and I'll make sure I don't miss anything.
Perfect. That's going to be awesome, man.
Thanks,
Cool.
man.
All right, guys. Have a great one, and we'll see you all later. Happy ZBrushing.
You guys.